As the political landscape in the United States becomes increasingly volatile, recent polls indicate that the Democratic Party is grappling with a significant decline in approval ratings, reaching historic lows. With internal strife exacerbating the situation, a growing number of constituents expressed dissatisfaction with the party's leadership and strategy in the face of a resurgent Republican opposition led by former President Donald Trump. According to two recent polls, only 27% of Americans approve of the job Democrats are doing, with a CNN survey revealing a favorability rating of just 29%, the lowest in the 33-year history of the poll. In stark contrast, Trump's approval ratings have soared to 47% as Republicans generally hold a favorability rating of 36%. The dissatisfaction is palpable even within the party itself. Only 63% of Democrats currently view their own party favorably, a sharp decline from 81% 4 years ago during President Biden's administration. The root of this discontent appears to stem from a series of missteps and perceived failures by Democratic leaders. A recent decision by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer not to block a Republican budget bill aimed at averting a partial government shutdown has triggered a backlash among both moderate and progressive members of the party. Schumer defended his choice, stating that leaders must sometimes make difficult decisions, and he believed a shutdown would ultimately harm the party. However, this perspective has not resonated well with many, including Representative Jasmine Crockett, Democrat Texas, who criticized Schumer's approach, declaring on CNN, "The idea that Chuck Schumer is the only one that's got a brain in the room is absolutely ridiculous." This dissent has manifested in protests against Schumer, underscoring a fracture within the party. Activists have taken to the streets, and a Change.org petition demanding Schumer's resignation has garnered over 21,000 signatures. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries' reluctance to express confidence in Schumer further illustrates the palpable frustration within Democratic ranks. When questioned about Schumer's future, Jeffries deflected with a terse next question, indicating a stark divide in the party's leadership. Moreover, polling data reveals that a majority of Democratic voters, 57%, desire a more combative stance against the GOP, a stark contrast to previous years when bipartisanship was favored. This shift in sentiment signifies a growing urgency among constituents for the party to take a stand against Republican policies, particularly as Trump consolidates his power in Congress. In South Dakota, the Democratic Party is also seeking to revitalize its presence with the announcement of Julian Beaudillon's candidacy for the U.S. Senate against Republican incumbent Mike Rounds in the 2026 elections. Beaudillon, a business owner and community activist, emphasizes a campaign focused on protecting working families and resisting the influence of big corporations and technology monopolies. His candidacy reflects a grassroots effort to revitalize the Democratic message, particularly as frustrations grow over the party's current leadership. Amidst these developments, Democrats are facing calls for a more vigorous resistance to Trump. Critics argue that the party has failed to mount an effective opposition, instead appearing ineffective and disorganized. Recent demonstrations have highlighted the public's desire for a more robust response to Trump's administration, with activists and politicians alike urging the party to embrace a bold stance against the current administration's policies. As the Democratic Party navigates this tumultuous period, the future remains uncertain. The internal conflicts and declining approval ratings suggest an urgent need for reassessment of strategies and messaging. Without a clear direction and renewed commitment to the party's core values, Democrats may struggle to regain the confidence of their constituents and effectively challenge the increasingly formidable Republican opposition. As the landscape continues to shift, the actions taken by party leaders in the coming months will be crucial in shaping the future of the Democratic Party and its role in American politics. In a rapidly evolving political landscape, the Republican Party is facing significant scrutiny as it navigates economic turmoil exacerbated by its own policies and the re-election of Donald Trump. With Trump's recent announcement of a sweeping 10% tariff on all imports, the global economy has entered a state of uncertainty, prompting retaliatory measures from countries like China, which has imposed a staggering 34% tariff on U.S. goods. The implications of this tariff war are profound, with leading financial institutions like Deutsche Bank and Goldman Sachs warning of a heightened risk of recession, estimating the chances at 50% and 45% respectively. The consequences for everyday Americans are beginning to manifest, as the average household is projected to bear an additional burden of approximately $3,800 annually due to these tariffs, according to research from the Budget Lab at Yale University. Despite this looming economic crisis, many Republicans are remaining steadfast in their support for Trump, prioritizing cultural battles over economic stability. The party's fixation on issues such as wokeness, described by some as a fear of pronouns, appears to overshadow genuine concerns about fiscal health. Critics argue that the Republican leadership's focus has strayed from economic prosperity, a sentiment echoed in recent commentary by political observers. Sarah Pequeño, a columnist for USA Today, posits that the GOP's reluctance to acknowledge the strength of the economy under previous Democratic leadership is indicative of a deeper issue, one where the party seems more inclined to embrace divisive rhetoric than to address the financial needs of its constituents. She highlights the economic plan proposed by Kamala Harris during her campaign, which aimed to foster an opportunity economy through initiatives such as tax credits for first-time homebuyers and small business owners. However, Harris's messaging struggled to resonate amidst the noise generated by Republican narratives. In Congress, the situation is equally tumultuous. The House has recently passed a multi-trillion-dollar budget framework, allowing Republicans to move forward with Trump's domestic agenda, which includes significant tax cuts and increased spending on defense and immigration. This blueprint was approved by a narrow margin, revealing rifts within the party, particularly among fiscal conservatives who are wary of the proposed spending levels. House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune have emphasized a commitment to finding at least $1.5 trillion in spending cuts, while critics, including Democrats, fear that essential social services like Medicaid could face drastic reductions. The budget resolution, which raises the nation's borrowing limit by $5 trillion to extend Trump's 2017 tax cuts through 2034, has drawn ire from Democrats who argue it favors the wealthy at the expense of low-income families. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has called the budget a heist, targeting crucial public health programs to fund tax breaks for billionaires, drawing attention to the potential harm these policies could inflict on the most vulnerable Americans. As the Republican Party marches forward with its economic agenda, many analysts are questioning whether it can reconcile its internal divides and prioritize the financial well-being of everyday Americans over political posturing. The coming weeks will be crucial as Congress hammers out the details of the budget and the implications of Trump's tariffs continue to unfold. The economic landscape remains precarious, and the GOP's ability to navigate this terrain effectively will be pivotal, not only for its political future but also for the livelihoods of millions of Americans. As the party faces these challenges, the question remains: will it choose to address the pressing economic concerns of its constituents, or will it remain ensnared in cultural conflicts that distract from the urgent need for fiscal responsibility and growth? In a significant development in the ongoing discourse surrounding voting rights in the United States, the Legal Defense Fund (LDF) has expressed strong opposition to the recently passed House bill known as the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Save Act. The organization is urging the Senate to reject this legislation, which they argue threatens to disenfranchise millions of eligible voters and undermines Congress's traditional role of safeguarding electoral access. According to the LDF, the SAVE Act represents a misguided approach to addressing issues of voter eligibility. The bill proposes stringent requirements that would necessitate every voter to appear in person at their local election office with original documents such as a birth certificate, passport, or naturalization certificate to register. This requirement, the LDF contends, would disproportionately affect marginalized groups including Black Americans, people of color, and those living in rural areas, many of whom may not have easy access to the required documents. Legal Defense Fund President and Director Counsel Janae S. Nelson criticized the bill, stating, "The SAVE Act erects a discriminatory barrier to the ballot while pretending to solve a problem that does not exist." Nelson's assertion underscores the LDF's belief that the bill is designed not to enhance voter security but rather to limit access to the ballot box for certain demographics. Statistics reveal that only half of the U.S. population holds a valid passport, with the number dropping to a mere third among Black Americans. Moreover, nearly 70 million Americans have changed their names due to marriage or other reasons, which could further complicate their ability to meet the identification requirements stipulated in the SAVE Act. The bill's provisions would also disrupt voter registration drives, initiatives that have historically played a crucial role in mobilizing political participation, particularly in Black communities. As racial disparities in voter turnout continue to widen, the potential impact of the SAVE Act raises alarms among civil rights advocates. The LDF statement emphasizes the urgency of the situation, calling for lawmakers to focus on advancing proposals that protect the fundamental right to vote instead of pursuing legislation that could have far-reaching negative consequences. As the Senate prepares to debate the SAVE Act, the outcome remains uncertain. The LDF's fervent plea serves as a reminder of the ongoing struggle for voting rights in America, a struggle that has deep historical roots and implications for the future of democracy in the country. The coming weeks will undoubtedly be pivotal as lawmakers grapple with the broader implications of this legislation and its potential to reshape the electoral landscape for millions of Americans. In a nation where the right to vote is often considered a cornerstone of democracy, the discourse around the SAVE Act underscores the delicate balance between voter security and accessibility, raising critical questions about who has the right to participate in shaping the future of the nation. In a significant and contentious move, the U.S. House of Representatives has passed a budget bill backed by former President Donald Trump that proposes sweeping tax cuts and government spending reductions. The legislation, which narrowly passed with a vote of 216 to 214, is seen as a critical element of Trump's ongoing legislative agenda, described by him as a big beautiful bill. Following the vote, Trump took to social media to celebrate the outcome, proclaiming it a foundational step towards one of the greatest and most important signings in the history of our country. However, the bill's passage does not guarantee its enactment into law. The House version contains deeper spending cuts than a previous Senate-approved measure, necessitating a reconciliation process to merge the two into a unified bill for the president's signature. The current House plan outlines an ambitious tax cut of approximately $5 trillion, which critics warn could exacerbate the national debt, projected to rise by $5.7 trillion over the next decade. As of now, the U.S. debt stands at a staggering $36 trillion, raising alarms among fiscal conservatives and prompting calls for even deeper cuts to government programs. The pushback from within the Republican Party itself has been notable. A faction of hardline conservatives initially opposed the bill, citing concerns over the growing national debt. However, their numbers dwindled to just 2 dissenters by the time of the vote. House Speaker Mike Johnson had faced significant pressure to secure support for the bill, averting a planned vote just a day earlier due to fears of insufficient backing within his party. The Senate version of the budget bill, which recently garnered approval, calls for a minimum of $4 billion in spending cuts, far less than the House's proposed $1.5 trillion. Senate leadership has indicated a commitment to pursue more aggressive cuts, with Senate Majority Leader John Thune stating, "We want to make government more efficient, effective, and leaner for the American people." While the budget framework has cleared a critical hurdle, the real challenge lies ahead. Lawmakers must now draft detailed legislation that reflects the promised cuts and aligns with Trump's broader agenda, which includes additional tax cuts on tips and Social Security benefits aimed at fulfilling campaign promises. The bill's approval would also necessitate a vote to raise the debt ceiling, a contentious issue that is likely to evoke further debate in Congress. Amid these developments, a parallel legislative issue has emerged with the House's passage of the SAVE Act, an initiative aimed at tightening voter registration processes. This measure, which passed with a vote of 220 to 208, has ignited fierce criticism from Democrats who argue that it could disenfranchise millions of eligible voters. The bill mandates proof of citizenship for voter registration, a requirement that many experts warn could disproportionately affect marginalized communities. Representative Jamie Raskin, a vocal opponent of the SAVE Act, condemned it as a blatant attempt at voter suppression, asserting that it would make it harder for tens of millions of eligible Americans to vote. The bill now faces an uphill battle in the Senate, where it will require a supermajority to overcome a likely filibuster. As the political landscape continues to evolve, the outcomes of both the budget bill and the SAVE Act will have lasting repercussions on governance and electoral integrity in the United States. With Trump's influence still resonant within the Republican Party, the coming weeks will be pivotal in determining whether these ambitious proposals can be fully realized or if they will falter under growing scrutiny. The future of U.S. fiscal policy and voting rights hangs in the balance, with both parties preparing for what could be a heated legislative battle. In a series of recent rulings, the U.S. Supreme Court has navigated the turbulent waters of presidential power under Donald Trump, revealing a cautious yet significant approach to executive authority. With Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett frequently emerging as pivotal votes, the court's decisions reflect a complex interplay between supporting presidential actions and maintaining a commitment to judicial checks on executive power. This delicate balance has raised questions about the future of civil liberties and the role of the judiciary in an increasingly polarized political landscape. In a notable 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court allowed Trump to resume deportations under the Alien Enemies Act, emphasizing that detainees must still receive due process to contest their removal. This ruling illustrates the court's reluctance to directly confront the executive branch while simultaneously asserting its authority to ensure procedural fairness. "They are punting as much as they can," remarked Sarah Isker, a legal analyst for ABC News, highlighting the court's hesitance to engage deeply with the substance of Trump's actions. Over the past month, the Supreme Court has addressed several of Trump's emergency requests, often siding with the president in lifting lower court injunctions that had impeded his agenda. In 3 of the 4 major cases reviewed, a narrow majority voted in favor of the administration, allowing Trump to freeze federal funds, terminate probationary federal workers, and suspend grants for teacher training. These rulings signal a judicial endorsement of Trump's aggressive overhaul of federal operations, albeit framed within procedural constraints. Constitutional law scholar Josh Blackman noted the court is sending a clear signal to the lower courts: stop it, suggesting a desire for lower courts to exercise caution in granting broad relief. Yet the court's decisions have not all favored the administration. In a separate ruling, justices mandated that Trump's administration pay $2 billion in foreign aid funds to nonprofit organizations, rejecting the White House's attempt to freeze the aid. Moreover, while allowing the administration to proceed with deportations under the Alien Enemies Act, the court made it clear that such actions are subject to judicial review and due process rights must be guaranteed for migrants. This nuanced dynamic has left some legal experts concerned about a potential shift in judicial philosophy. Hofstra University law professor James Sample expressed unease over the majority's apparent disinterest in judicial remedies for legal wrongs, noting a cavalier and arguably callous approach to individual rights in the context of executive power. Looking ahead, the Supreme Court faces significant challenges that could redefine the boundaries of presidential authority. Among the most contentious issues is Trump's executive order aimed at ending birthright citizenship, a move that contradicts long-standing legal precedent established by the 14th Amendment. Additionally, the court is set to consider Trump's authority to remove heads of independent agencies, an issue central to the future of governance and the separation of powers. Legal scholars are particularly focused on the implications of these rulings, especially in light of the court's historical precedent set by Humphrey's Executor v. United States, which protects agency heads from being dismissed without cause. Trump's push to overturn this precedent could pave the way for a broader executive power that might diminish the checks historically placed on presidential authority. Constitutional power is a zero-sum game, Sample warned, indicating that an expansion of executive power could lead to a corresponding decrease in judicial oversight and individual rights. as the court prepares to tackle these critical questions. Its decisions will undoubtedly shape the balance of power between the executive and judicial branches for years to come. With a conservative majority that includes 3 justices appointed by Trump, the stakes are high and the potential for a redefinition of executive authority looms large. How the court navigates these challenges will reveal much about its commitment to upholding the Constitution and protecting the rights of individuals against overreach by the state.